crash cases, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys of Hollis, Wright, and Couch are here to serve you. With civil trial lawyer Josh Wright from the firm of Hollis, Wright, and Couch, and Alabama's 13 host, David Lamb. The attorneys answer your tough legal questions straight ahead.
Hello and welcome in to the attorneys. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Want to remind you that we are here to answer your tough legal questions. We've got an expert panel here for you. You can call, text, or email your legal questions to us throughout the evening. You're going to find the information on your screen where you can get in touch with us. Our goal here is to provide answers to your tough legal questions. That's why we have a panel here with us that could do just that. Joined again, once again, by Josh Wright. Josh, how are you?
Awesome. Hope you had a great week.
Indeed, did as well. Our topic tonight, well, these big trucks on the roadways, they can be intimidating.
You know, not only can they be intimidating, but there are just a whole host of different regulations that are applicable in these cases. And the key to one of these cases is getting to an attorney and getting there early and getting with somebody that knows what they're doing. And Matt Abbott from the Abbott Law Firm in St. Clair County is a guy that we go to and deal with these cases quite a bit. We're glad to have him on the show. As always, glad to see you.
And Josh, great to see you. Josh, great to see you. David, great to see you as well.
Matt, appreciate you being here. And let's kind of jump right into this topic. What laws govern a trucking company, and are there laws to govern their conduct, the truck driver's conduct?
No, absolutely. But the way this comes, David, it falls under the Department of Transportation, and then the subcategory under that is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And I'm talking there are regulations that are very thick that govern these professional drivers. And let's not forget that. These folks are on the road as professionals to drive an 80,000-pound vehicle, and there are a host and a very long list of regulations that must be met for these people to be certified to be on the road. Let me say, to start with, some of my best clients I've ever had are truck drivers, and I think Josh would agree with that.
Absolutely.
But and we're not talking about folks that follow the rules and the regulations. We're talking about some of those drivers, and they're out there who don't follow those regulations, and they cheat, for lack of a better word. Josh, when you agree?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, we're not saying, certainly we're not indicting an industry and saying that all truckers are bad, because that's not true. There are truckers doing it the right way and companies doing it the right way on a daily basis. What we're here to talk about today is those that are not doing it the right way. And Matt mentioned some of the regulations that are applicable. One of the interesting things that people probably don't recognize is that truck drivers are held really to a heightened standard from that of a typical driver. When we all get in our vehicles tonight and go home, we're held to certain rules of the road and responsibilities that we have as drivers in Alabama. A truck driver is held to certain federal regulations as well as those rules of the road, and even in Alabama, under certain circumstances, there's a Public Service Commission guideline and rules that they have to follow. So the truckers are held to a heightened standard that is unique and different to the stuff that we have to do on a daily basis driving.
So the rules of the road are a bit different. We love to take questions. The question we've got here: how long do I have to file a lawsuit if I am hurt in a trucking accident?
Always a good question. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, under Alabama law, you're going to have 2 years from the date of the accident. So that is your mark on your calendar, and you can go up to 2 years. But the key in a trucking accident is this: if you're involved in one, you don't need to waste any time. These are very sensitive matters with very important information that's contained inside that truck that can be the key to your case. And if you don't jump right on it, Josh, and I know you would agree, you may lose that information and lose a very vital aspect or the evidence or proof that you need for your claim.
And I think one of the things you're referring to is the black box that sometimes is in trucks. Explain that a little bit so the viewers understand that.
What we have today in today's technology is there will be what we call a black box located inside your typical commercial 18-wheeler carrier. That box will be able to give you the very valuable and sensitive information to show you the speeds, show you whether the turn signal was used, show you the braking patterns for over a period of time leading up to impact. How important is that? Wow. It can be absolutely crucial to your case, because if the testimony is different, testimony's testimony, but hard scientific data that's recorded on that truck, it's not biased, it's not swayed, and you can rely on it, Dave.
Yeah, and the forensics really help in these cases, and it's another reason why you want to get with a law firm or a lawyer that understands these concepts and understands these cases and has the experts that can go and evaluate those types of things early on in the case. The forensics are critical, and Matt, I know, sees just like I do when we handle these cases, a lot of time the forensics prove the claim for the driver, and prove it against the person that may have been the injured victim. And so it works both ways, but forensic information is very helpful.
Yeah. Another question we've got about insurance. Know that we all have to have insurance in the state of Alabama. Are trucking companies supposed to carry insurance for accidents?
Yeah, absolutely. And currently, as it stands right now, David, your normal trucking company carrier has to maintain at least $750,000 in insurance. Now, that goes up if you're carrying oil or any type of petroleum product. You have to have $1 million. And if you have hazardous cargo, gas is hazardous cargo, it could be up to $5 million is what you have to have. Now, also, Josh, you want to add on that?
Yeah, there are a couple other exceptions too, one of which is if you are a common carrier carrying individuals like buses, for example, those companies have to have a heightened amount of insurance compared to the traditional DOT $750,000. So they oftentimes will have anywhere from $1 million to $5 million, depending.
And we're talking, just to kind of help us understand, so the 18-wheelers, I think we're familiar with those, but are we talking about, like the larger government kind of, the garbage trucks, or from a size standpoint, is it anything above just kind of a regular vehicle?
It's a good question.
It's a great question, David. A commercial carrier, all right, is anything over 10,000 pounds. Okay. You can have a trucking company with one truck, one driver, one job. If you have a DOT number, you are a trucking company, and if you travel outside of 100 miles from your base, then you have to follow the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration regulations that we were talking about earlier.
All right. Another question we've got: how are truckers treated differently than regular vehicles on the road? Touched on this a little bit, but is there a different standard, different expectation? Sounds like there is.
Yeah, there is. I'll take this one. We did touch on it earlier. Not only are there different regulations that they've got to follow, but those regulations become very applicable for things like this. You and I don't have to be medically tested on a yearly or a bi-yearly basis, where truckers do. They have to be medically evaluated to make sure that they can safely operate a vehicle on the road. After an accident, you and I don't have to be drug tested the way that a transportation company that has a DOT certification would have to. So if a trucker's involved in an accident, he has a certain amount of time within which he has to go get drug tested. That's unique. Again, kind of a heightened standard of things. Yeah. There are a lot of other circumstances I know that you probably see too.
Well, the main one, in working in St. Clair County, there's 2 ways in, 2 ways out, I-59 and I-20. So I get exposed to a lot of this. The main thing that I want to look at, first off, are the log books. And those are a requirement that a trucker has to have that you and I wouldn't have to have on the road. That truck driver has to be able to document and have a log book to show how long they rested, most importantly, and then how long they drove, because there are very specific regulations on that you and I normally would not have to do. A trucker cannot just drive till they can't drive anymore, okay? They have to be rested and have that recuperative sleep to be able to have the faculties to operate an 80,000-pound vehicle safely on the roads and highways with the rest of us.
And then from a training standpoint as well, I've got a fellow I go to church with, a company that's a large company, super trained. I mean, really, I was surprised at the level of training he went through. Is there even a standard on that, the amount of training for those over-the-road licenses and that sort of thing?
Well, there are, and the companies are responsible for that, to make sure that the drivers that they're putting on the road have these minimum qualification safety standards, starting with your CDL that you'd have. You also have to pass what Josh touched on earlier, are these fitness tests. You have to be fit and healthy enough to drive this 80,000-pound vehicle on the road. You don't want a person with a serious heart condition driving down the road. That's not safe for that trucker or for anybody else. So, from that standpoint, yes, there is an extensive amount of training that should be there. Some required, but some of the better companies, like I think you're probably talking about, will go a step higher to make sure that their drivers are even more trained or further trained than what those minimum standards would require.
One of the other heightened standards is background checks. Background checks are required under the regulations, so an individual that's going to be operating one of these huge vehicles is going to be background checked and are supposed to be background checked by the company before they're even hired.
All right, time for our first break, but don't forget, you can call, text, or email your questions directly to the attorneys. They're here to offer their expertise and help you solve your legal battles. You can contact them 24/7. We just might feature your question on the show. You can
Legal questions. This week's topic relates to trucking accidents and injuries. Here are the facts you need to know and what you should do if you or someone you care about is involved in any of these cases. First, never admit fault after an accident. Let the police officer do their job and make that determination. Second, other than law enforcement, don't talk to an insurance adjuster or give statements to anybody after the accident until you have spoken with a lawyer. Third, contact a lawyer as soon as possible because an early inspection of the truck and cargo is extremely important in a trucking accident. Fourth, you only have 2 years from the time of this type of accident to bring a lawsuit. If you've been injured in a car accident or a truck accident, call a lawyer right away. Don't delay. Please remember your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis, Wright & Couch want to help answer your questions on real issues you face in your life. We can't guarantee we'll answer every question during the show, but we can guarantee a competent lawyer will respond to each and every question you send in. You'll get a response. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks as always for watching The Attorneys right here on Alabama's 13.
Welcome back in to the attorneys. A reminder as we come back and continue our conversation on trucking accidents that we'd love to hear from you all throughout the show. You'll see information there where you can get in touch with us. You can call, text, email. We would love to hear from you. And actually, we're going to start off this segment with one of the questions that has been posed to us. We've talked about the expectations, requirements of the drivers. The question here, is the trucking company actually responsible for the actions of the drivers?
It's a great question, Matt. You want to?
Oh, they are. It's their employee, and we call that vicarious liability under the law. If that driver is out there on behalf of that company operating in furtherance of the business activity of that company, then yes, the driver is the agent of that company, which ultimately holds the company responsible as well for the driver's actions.
And Matt, when we went to break, we were talking about logbooks.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about logbook audits and how that works and the type of experts that you get involved in those things.
Well, that's why it's so important, Josh. You know, and as you know, we've worked these. How many of these have we worked together? You got to get somebody in to look at the logbooks, okay? And we talked earlier about these drivers that they need to keep their logs as required by the regulations, which means you can only drive so many hours and then you have to rest, and then you can drive so many hours and you have to rest. Most of the truckers out there are honest folks just trying to earn a living, and they do it the right way. We are talking about the ones that cheat, and what they do is they may have a set of logbooks, okay, that we may get through the course of a claim, but then there's a real logbook, okay, that they keep somewhere else where they're over the hours and they're not following the rules that they turn in to their boss to get their paycheck. So it's real easy to catch them. What we have to do, and we have to do it early, in a trucking situation, is get an expert to do a logbook audit. And what they do is chronicle what this driver has pledged that they have driven and what they've rested. And then we compare that to where they've been, because these trucks these days, they're going to have GPS on the top of the truck. So we know where they've been. We'll be able to track where they got gas. And does that correspond with what they've pledged as far as where they've driven and how far they've driven and how much they've rested? Josh, you've seen this a million times.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, even for those, talk about forensics, this is really kind of neat, this science, if you will. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't have GPS, experts can evaluate a logbook and determine whether or not, based on governors that a vehicle may have and how fast they could be going, the area they were driving, the amount of time it took to get from point A to point B, whether or not their logbook can actually be consistent with reality. And so from a forensic perspective, it's really kind of neat. These experts do a great job of being able to come in and evaluate the logbooks and confirm, are they doing it the right way or are they not doing it the right way. And it's also very complicated. We don't have to get into all the specifics, but in general terms, there are some regulations that apply in this circumstance. A driver that is driving 11 hours has to take 10 continuous hours off for rest. If they have been on duty, not just driving, but on duty for 14 hours, they have to take 10-hour breaks until they can drive again. There are also some complicated weekly rules about the 6-day rule, the 7-day rule that we don't have to get into. But the point is, there are regulations that are applicable to the drivers, and these logbook audit experts will come in and confirm whether somebody should have even been on the road or not. Cases that Matt and I see quite a bit are examples of a driver, again, one of the ones doing it the wrong way, that should have never been on the road at the time of the accident because they should have been resting. Yeah. And those cases are cases that all too often we see, unfortunately.
And Josh, you're talking about the forensics and the science that we have now that we didn't used to have when we started doing this, can even be overridden. Let me give you an example. With this GPS material, I've seen a circumstance where someone went to sleep in Little Rock and woke up in Atlanta, and they were supposed to be resting during that time. Well, how's that happen? Yeah. Well, their GPS doesn't show. You know what they're doing? They're taking a metal bucket like your grandmama used to mop with, and they'll strap it to the top of that GPS where the signal doesn't even go through. So we're talking about those drivers that are out there that are motivated by profit over safety. How can I get to where I need to go faster, and how can I cheat to do it? And that's the kind of stuff that we have to stop, because that endangers every car, every person, every family that they're passing on the road.
That's exactly right.
You guys touched on a couple of issues that some of the questions that we're receiving here. In terms of the timeliness, why is it important to obtain counsel quickly in a trucking case? You talk about the logbooks. Is time a factor in those audits?
You better believe it. Yeah. These trucking, the companies and the carriers, if they're involved in an accident that involves injuries, death, they have a team. And let me tell you something. They fly in like a disaster relief team. Right. They're measuring skid marks. They're taking pictures. They're getting statements. They're doing everything to see what the facts are and what they can use to minimize their liability. Right. So you have a whole team working against you while you're in the hospital. Yeah. So you better get somebody on your team as quickly as possible to get that same information before it disappears.
Yeah, and I'll give you a recent example in a trucking case that our firm worked, that I was involved in. There was a team on the ground within 12 hours of the accident that had already downloaded information related to the vehicle, and had already done an accident reconstruction by the time that we got there on day 2. And not to say that he who gets there first controls the facts of the case and wins the case. That's not always the circumstance. But there's no doubt that if somebody gets there first, they have the ability to potentially work with and build a relationship with, for example, the officers on the scene, taint that testimony from the front end. I've seen lots of circumstances, I know Matt has too. In fact, we've worked cases like this together where the officer, his report is really based on some of the accident reconstruction done by the trucking company. Oh. And so, that can cause some significant problems in the case itself. So getting to somebody that knows what they're doing and how to litigate these cases quickly and efficiently is very important. And
you also mentioned governors. Do these trucks have governors? I mean, are they required to have them?
Josh? Yeah, it just depends. I will tell you this. The vast majority of cases that we see now, there are governors on trucks. However, some of the smaller mom and pop trucking companies may still not have governors. Or sometimes we even see circumstances where there is a governor, but then you do a logbook evaluation and you realize that somebody averaged 75 miles an hour going from point A to point B, yet their vehicles are supposed to be governed at 65. Yeah. And so there are some creative drivers that will go out there and find a way to manipulate the system itself. And again, as Matt was talking about, We're not saying every trucker does that, because that's certainly not the case. But for those that are cheating and doing it that way, the idea is to make sure that we're protecting the rest of us on the road by making sure we stop that type of behavior.
Absolutely.
The NASCAR field, they don't like governors, but maybe in trucks.
That's right. That's right.
Not
That's
a
right.
bad idea. Time to head to break, and when we come back, our final segment of the night, don't forget you can call, text, or email your legal questions directly to the attorneys. They are here to offer their expert advice to you and help you solve your legal battles. Contact them 24/7. You might feature those questions. Welcome back to our final segment here of the attorneys. Got some questions to buzz through, but this final segment, if you have a question for us, be sure and go ahead and get that to us, because we would love to deal with it if we can. Some questions, gentlemen, that I want to be sure we get to. One, why is a traffic accident involving a commercial truck more likely to cause an injury than one involving a passenger car?
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, you're dealing the laws of physics on that one, David. I mean, you're talking about, depending on the load and the cargo that's being carried, thousands and thousands of pounds. I've mentioned 80,000-pound vehicle a couple of times we've been talking tonight. Your typical car is going to weigh, what, 3,000 pounds, depending on what you drive.
Wow.
So, you know, the laws of physics on that, and the bigger the cargo, the harder it is to slow down. Those speeds, those impacts. You know, if you're driving a Subaru, you're going to come in on the wrong end of the stick on that one.
Yeah, it's, you know, some of the realities here. Truckers are on the road a lot more than the rest of us.
Right.
They're operating vehicles on a daily basis on the interstates with the speeds that Matt was talking about. You know, I have found in doing these type of cases, some of the best drivers in the country are truckers. I've also found some of the worst drivers in the country are truckers. And so, you know, again, it goes down to trying to make sure that we are able to zero in on those that are doing it the right way and those that are not doing it the right way.
Another question we've got here, operating something of the size of a large truck, what role does alcohol and drug use play in those tractor-trailer accidents?
You know, you're going to see it, David, and it shows up more than what you would think, to be honest with you. You know what's great these days, though? We can go in, and this is only recent. Back when Josh and I first started doing this, it would take years of litigation to pull this information out. But now if you have an attorney that knows how to get within the Department of Transportation, we can find out how many accidents that they've had, how many accidents involved drugs, alcohol, how many accidents involved driver fatigue, how many accidents involved the health of the driver, where they were just simply not healthy enough to drive the vehicle. And then another one that we see that pops up a lot, Josh, is that's a dangerous truck. Yeah. And a lot of times, and our state troopers are doing the best job that they can to look at the tires, to look at the axles, to look at the brakes, to look at the air brakes, to look and make sure everything is operating on that truck as it should to be worthy to be on the road. Now, you can go to the Department of Transportation, you can get this information by carrier by using their DOT number, and it will use those criteria to give a safety score. It's actually a great thing, and what you can't get directly from the Department of Transportation, you can file by a Freedom of Information Act, which an attorney who's familiar with this kind of litigation can go in, and we can know sometimes more about that carrier on their current statistics than they probably even know about themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, and Matt touched on an issue that I think it's important to highlight. We see circumstances all the time, David, where the trucker is hardworking and doing it the right way. The problem is his company is putting him on the road with dangerous equipment, whether it is tires, whether it is brakes, whether it's a vehicle that has not been maintained appropriately. And that's another issue that has to be evaluated whenever these cases are taken. Did the truck meet the expectations of what it should have out on the road? And so it's not always the trucker. I want to make it very clear there. Sometimes truckers doing it the right way. The problem is the equipment he was using was not yet handled properly.
A couple of minutes left in our show, but want to give you time for a final thought, Matt.
I want to follow up on what Josh said there. We're seeing more and more hard-working folks who drive a truck for a living, and they're trying to feed their families, and they're working for a company, and that company says, well, you want to work for me, you got to drive number 26. I don't want to drive number 26. It's got brake problems, it's old. Well, we don't have any work for you. And that person is put in a situation with not being able to provide for their family or drive a truck that has known problems. And that is just not fair. Right. And I blame the trucking companies for that, because they're putting, again, profit over the safety of not only their truck driver, but everybody else out there on the road. Right. And if these folks aren't held accountable, David, through the court system and through attorneys who handle this litigation, then who's going to hold them accountable?
That's exactly right. The last thing I'd say is get to a lawyer. Matt and I say the same thing. You don't have to come to our firms. Right. Go to somebody. Get with somebody that knows how to do this litigation early so that you are able to dot the I's and cross the T's and get the case prepared if there is a case there in the first place. And you may very well find out that the trucking company did nothing wrong, the driver did nothing wrong, but get to a lawyer that understands these cases on the front end. It's critically important.
And yeah, it sounds like a pretty complicated matter and a lot of stuff that you don't want to miss out on.
Correct.
Matt, Josh, appreciate you being with us. Thanks so much.
As always, good to see you again.
Hey, I want to remind you as we wrap this up, you can contact us by email 24/7. You can email the questions. Also, fan the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch on Facebook. Also follow them on Twitter.